Hi, I'm Wyatt Cash with Scoop News Group, and we're here at FedTalks with Gretchen Stewart, Chief Data Scientist at Intel Public Sector as part of Intel. Gretchen, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much. I'm delighted to be part of this.
So let me start first. How has the federal technology space played a critical role in 2020 as the unprecedented effects of the pandemic really rocked our nation?
That's really a great question. I think one of the things that this has really done that I've seen is public, private, and academic kind of partnerships that lots of times people are looking at their own stovepipe, and COVID has really provided a way for, and I live just outside of Boston, where those universities working with the hospitals in Boston, then working with Health and Human Services, that they really have come together to leverage current data, historic data, and even in some cases leveraging, I'll call it social science data, so that they can start to look at and pinpoint, who has more propensity, where are the areas maybe where things are trending in the not best way, you know what I mean, around COVID. But I think that it's really opened up, I've seen huge dialogue and great communication between the universities, the public-private hospitals, and the government. It's really been something that's been part of and very fun for Intel to be, scary, but also exciting for Intel to be part of that. We honestly created a pandemic fund of $150, $200 million that we set aside to really help jumpstart any great idea, any opportunity that we could help solve.
That's exciting to hear. Next, let me ask, how can the federal government kind of build on what they've been doing or even leapfrog ahead in using modern and emerging technologies like cloud and AI and automation?
Another great question. I always have to go back to the beginning. And I like to remind people that the National Science Foundation and other places within research in the government have been working on artificial intelligence and machine learning for quite some time. Honestly, I think a lot of people don't realize the first AI and machine learning conference was in 1956, and it was at Dartmouth College. And so many of these math equations, many of these very smart capabilities were not really brought to fruition until you got the compute, the storage, the bandwidth, and things like cloud that allow you to test out what you might do. Let's say, as an example, you're working on something specifically around natural language processing, and you're trying to figure out, can we do that with 150 different languages? Could we create some chat bot? How might we do that? And you can go and do this test, get some data, and test it out in the cloud and see how you might do that. And then maybe add additional languages or leverage some other data sources from somewhere else, whether it be a public data source, maybe a university has some social data that you want to pull. You can do all of that and really test it out in the cloud, which has been a great way for people to figure out, hey, is there some real validity here? And can I then scale that? Could I then bring it back and scale it within our environment? But it gives people a way to be able to test. And it also has a lot of, like at Google and Intel and others, a lot of really smart data scientists who are also doing advanced work that they're really putting out in open source so that anybody can pull that information and leverage it. Again, you don't have to be a data scientist. You need to understand what your problem is and where these data sets might be. But, people are able to solve a lot more even if you don't have a PhD.
Well, as you look across the public sector, how is the federal government working in new and potentially creative ways to bring talented technologists to the workforce?
We honestly have, the chief data scientist for all of Intel, who I work really closely with, is somebody who's on loan with the FBI, as an example. So there's a way where you get someone who has some interesting talent, and that might not be somebody who would be working at the FBI, but who literally comes in sits with folks at Christopher Wray's staff and others and helps them formulate the data strategy, and then can help them look at maybe some digital forensics opportunities or some other predictive or leveraging natural language, whatever it might be, and that you've got a public-private partnership right there as an example. And then there are also just so many applications today that allow you to become a citizen data scientist. So SAS is an example, statistical application. I used it, I was a math major, I used it all the time in college, but it has evolved to be a very, very sophisticated tool around artificial intelligence and machine learning. And literally just point it to your data. It's got a really nice graphical user interface, and you can just drop and drag and just come up with the problem that you have, point it to the data and let it churn through it, honestly, and leverage different scoring mechanisms that you might use. That's just one. There are others like Data Robot. There are SAP, as an example, has a lot of tools, intelligent tools, predictive maintenance tool, algorithms that are all just built into the application. So while it's great to have a PhD in data science, you might be able to have one or two of those, but a whole team of 10 or 15 people who understand what the problem is and who can leverage great applications that are out there and become really, really good citizen data scientists.
Well, it sounds like we're getting closer to the notion of democratizing data science to some extent. That's exciting. Lastly, you get to see a lot that's going on across the public sector and industry. What other trends or priorities do you have on your radar as we head into 2021?
That's a really good question. I'm seeing more and more people trying to understand how to leverage structured and unstructured data. And also, as I spend some time with a lot more of the folks that are now being named chief data scientists, because I think it was 2018, there was a specific requirement that each agency, each organization had to have their own chief data scientists, or chief data officer, excuse me. And I'm honestly seeing that some people are still at the beginning of defining what that data strategy is. That in some cases they still aren't, and again, this is no fault of anyone's, but still trying to figure out where is all the data, and is that data even, are we even keeping data and storing data that is really impactful or something that we need to worry about. So it's almost, I won't say starting at the basics, but it's almost doing a whole inventory, and also us Intel thinking about ways we can create tools that can help with that data gathering and that inventory, so that it doesn't become such a cumbersome way that somebody has to figure out what they would want to do as a chief data officer. But we're, as an example, we will have next year a GPU. We have visual processing units, VPUs, so to do computer vision. We're also looking and working on LiDAR and radar as it relates to autonomous vehicles. And a lot of that in the public sector are things that they can really leverage that are being done in the enterprise. So I think more and more I'm seeing that the government is very, very interested in working with all of us in public sector to help move their strategies and help provide better security, better services for the citizens in a really, really insightful public-private partnership sort of a way. It's exciting.
And it is indeed. Gretchen Stewart, thank you so much for taking time to join us here at FedTalks. We appreciate it.
Thank you.